we're just going to open it up with Michigan. Just got a huge commit in my town or my city or whatever you want to call it. Jakari Lipsey, the left tackle from Loy Norix. Kind of a funny situation. I actually coached him from his freshman year all the way to his junior year. So kind of a fun thing there. I was his O-line coach both of his years on varsity so far. So really fun situation I got to be a part of there. So congrats to him, but also congrats to Michigan because he is actually right now the highest ranked recruit in 2027 for their class. So two pretty big things for both sides there. So Michigan got a good one, and I'm just going to say it here. You can quote me on this. I think the kid could be a first round pick in the NFL draft. So I think Michigan got a good one. So with that, that's really all we got other than Lions news and a little bit of draft stuff. So we're just going to go ahead and keep it pushing.
Tell him,
With Go ahead.
tell him how he was nothing before you got to him, man. Come on.
Yeah, yeah. I made him 6'5", 300 pounds at 16 years old. That was all me
Yeah.
for sure.
Jesus.
Totally. Yeah, he's a freaking beast, and he can do a backflip and dunk. So that's a big reason why I think he's got the athleticism to definitely make it. I believe. But with that, congrats to him and both obviously Michigan as well. But with that being said, uh, the Detroit Lions. Whoa, the Detroit Lions. That was weird. Um, the Detroit Lions have some things going on. Nothing like breaking news, obviously. Well, something that could be considered breaking news because it literally just happened. Ahmad Hassanin, um, he got officially given the international player roster exemption or designation. I guess kind of both fit. But that means basically that he is allowed to be on the roster in the off season, go through training camp and things like that. Without taking up an extra spot. So he'll be the 91st player on our roster, which is pretty cool. I think it's a cool thing the NFL has allowed. And I would assume the Eagles will do something similar with their seventh round pick once the regular season starts, at least, because that gives you a extra spot on your practice squad. And I mean, who knows? He might make their team, but I'm not too confident on that. I think he's going to need a few years before he'll actually see any NFL time. And I just feel like when you have a guy like that, he's probably not going to be on your active roster. But we'll see, how that plays out. But the Lions just got this exemption for Ahmad Hassanin. So pretty cool thing going on there. And, a guy that we drafted last year, obviously in the seventh round, and then he didn't make our final roster. He had an injury issue, so he's kind of bounced around, but he stayed with the Lions the whole time. He ended up back on our practice squad, so he'll probably end up back there again. But pretty cool thing that we can just have him for quote unquote free due to his international status.
Excuse me. Yeah, yeah, you pretty much summed it up. I know when we drafted him, he came in with a lot of, I'll just say fan hype, just because he is a really good story and whatnot. And I am very curious to see what he can do for us on the field. But I don't want to say taking advantage, but they are taking advantage of that roster exemption because then he doesn't count for the 90, so we can kind of have 91 in a sense. And as you mentioned, Philly is most likely going to do the same if they haven't already. But he is someone that, especially now that we have Derek Moore that we drafted in the second round, it takes the pressure off trying to like rush him, and we can really let him develop because he does have a phenomenal base and skill set, I'll say, to grow his game.
Yeah, and I agree there. I do think he could become something. I don't think he's going to be, some freaking Khalil Mack or anything like that,
Oh
which is
yeah,
kind of a random one because I guess he's not that great anymore. But that's
he
somebody
was
from.
though.
He was awesome. I remember watching him live at Buffalo because they played Western Michigan when I was a kid, and I was like, oh my God. I think it was probably the best. Pass rusher I have ever seen live in terms of just like the way he played in that game. I was like, what the hell? He's the number one overall pick. I left that game against Western Michigan thinking he was the number one overall pick. So anyway, obviously he's not going to be the number one pass rusher in the NFL or anything, but he could develop into a pretty solid rotational piece, I think. But we'll have to see how that plays out. On other news, DJ Reader has signed to the New York Giants, which Not really big news, I don't think. As Lions fans, we kind of knew he was gone. I think just the fact that he was still out there, people kind of maybe thought there's potential that Reader comes back. I didn't really see it. I felt like the fact that he was gone for this long was kind of like the icing on the cake. Well, the icing on the cake would be the defensive tackle we picked in the draft. Not to say that he, took his Reader's spot, but it's like, okay, obviously we're looking to add some depth there when we already are decently deep without Reader. So I think the writing was on the wall there.
I agree, especially when we went back to back because we took a D tackle on the sixth and seventh, or there might have been back to back sevenths. I know we traded around a little bit, but our last two picks in the draft were both D tackles, and I don't think his game really translated to the Lions very well personally, because he was an absolute like top 10 D tackle in the league with Cincinnati, and I know he's starting to get up there in age and whatnot. And I'm not saying he was terrible, but he just, in my opinion, wasn't worth his play wasn't worth the 20 some $1 million price tag that we were giving him. So I'm not really sad to see him go. Um, but like at the same time, I don't have any ill will against him. I actually really do like the fit with the Giants because they do have all those pass rushers. I know they just got rid of Dexter Lawrence, so at least this is a veteran presence they can put in the middle of that D line. But in terms of the Lions, I don't think we're going to rue the day that we let them go.
Yeah, I'm definitely there with you on that. And with that, that's really all we have on like big news, quote unquote, with which at what is it today, May 6th? That is big news at this point of the NFL offseason. So you can kind of take that for what you will, I guess. But with that, there is some other news going on with the Lions right now. Obviously, they declined Jack Campbell's fifth-year option and then accepted Gibbs. This was not, I mean, a surprise, I think, to literally anybody that pays attention to the Detroit Lions and how franchise tags work. And it's not a thing on, or, a negative on Jack Campbell by any means, in my opinion. I think in everyone's opinion, it's just an obvious thing you have to do because the off-ball linebacker franchise tag gets lumped in with the edge rusher, so they're getting way more than the market value of a linebacker would be right now. So his fifth-year option was something like 22, 24 million, something around there, and he's likely going to get close to that. But I would say, you know, something closer to like 19 to 21 million per year. We'll kind of see what that is. 19 would be a like home team or hometown discount. And obviously
Yep.
this isn't his hometown, but it would be like, saying I want to stay here in Detroit and help build and take a couple million off my salary per year. And we'll see how that plays out. I have a couple numbers here that I pulled from a few websites. Right now people are thinking Campbell's going to get around 20 million per year, 4 years, 80 million with a decent chunk guaranteed. So something around like 35, 40, maybe even 45 million on the high end. I think 45 would be a little much, considering I do believe that is what Devin Lloyd got in free agency, but I guess we could, check my numbers
For
on
how
that.
much?
I think it was 45 million guaranteed that Devin Lloyd got. Could be wrong on that, but I do believe that's what it was. And if it was, wait, no, he got 45 total,
Yeah, he got 45 total
three
over three
years.
years,
Okay, yes, yes. So
25
yeah,
million
no,
guaranteed.
no. I take back what I said. I do think that, somewhere in that 35 to 45 million would make a ton of sense in terms of this contract for Campbell, which it is a little bit much right now considering what a guy like Devin Lloyd did just get in free agency. However, I think Jack Campbell right now is a little bit better, so it makes sense in my opinion. But we'll have to see. Like I said, I think it's going to be between 19 to 21.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good kind of safe number. And as you mentioned, if they picked up the fifth year option, it would have been for 22 million a year, and that would have made him the highest paid linebacker in all of football. So while I understand he might even be worth it, especially since just the way contracts are nowadays, like obviously don't get me wrong, I love Sam Brown, but when he signed his extension at that time, it made him the highest paid receiver, and then four or five guys jumped him. So it wouldn't surprise me when he signs his deal if he is going to be the highest paid linebacker. Once again, it might look like a discount 3 or 4 years from now, maybe even just 2 to 3. But I agree with kind of not giving him the most money of any linebacker in the league on a 1 year deal. I just hope, and I don't think it's going to happen by any means. I just want to throw it out there for the viewers. Just put all the cards on the table. This could happen, maybe. Have a situation like Tyler Linderbaum in Baltimore. They declined his fifth-year option, even though he's a damn good player, because they thought they could extend him on a long-term deal, and obviously the Raiders signed him for an astronomical number. So I doubt that happens. I do feel like they are on great standing with each other, so I would not worry about that. But just saying that that's kind of where Baltimore was at this point in time last year.
Yeah, and I totally get the trepidation with that. I do think they are just a little bit different. Just because, like, Linderbaum, I feel like uh, left not because Harbaugh got fired, but I feel like the regime change and everything like that probably didn't help. So I don't think the GM, when they declined the fifth year option, maybe foresaw that being the case. But who knows? I also think the Lions have been in contact with Campbell and his agent, throughout this process. So I think they kind of understand that he does want to, re-sign here. It's just a matter of getting the deal done, like getting the fine numbers. So, excuse me. With that, I do think, Jack Campbell is one of the best linebackers in the NFL right now. And I do think that it's smart to decline his fifth year simply because, like you said, you're not going to give him 22 million. And that's guaranteed, by the way, because, like, with the franchise tag, it's just a guaranteed contract. Because since the team gets to say you got to stay, the team's got to pay. So, but I feel like, with Campbell specifically, he's going to end up signing a deal with Detroit that's not necessarily super team friendly, but the structure will be. And I think that's the reason why they ended up declining this, because we're going to be able to give him 20 million, 21 million a year, but it's going to be a $14 million cap hit or something along those lines. So it'll open us a little bit more money to work with other guys. And I think that's the thing to take in consideration, because like we have so many guys, Branch, Laporta, Campbell, Gibbs, all needing big extensions. So I think that definitely plays a big part into it.
With the other guys that we, excuse me, recently just re-signed, like the Sewells and Goffs and Jamos, those extensions are kicking in, so they're no longer on their like rookie cheap contracts. So while we are extending like the second, I guess, tier, even though they're tier one players, the first group that we already extended, their more expensive contracts are kicking in. So that's something to keep in mind. And as I stated a few times, on like the money end of things is my weaker point in my football knowledge. But someone way smarter than me is going to figure this out. There's always ways. Look at Philly, et cetera, et cetera. Even though they have gotten rid of some key players, they just got rid of Sweat a couple years ago, and then N'Kobe Dean last year. So even the grades can't re-sign every single person, but we'll get, in my opinion, all these core guys, no problem.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I think, the Lions right now are sitting between 90 and 100 million for the next two seasons in cap space. And obviously these guys will take a big chunk out of that. But I think with how Brad Holmes in that group of guys in the finance room, finagle the numbers, I think they're going to be able to give us at least, maybe even 30 million to play with in free agency still the next 2 years with those extensions. So I do think the Lions are set up pretty well as long as those guys don't ask for the number one. Not, as long as each player isn't like, I want to be paid the highest at my position. If that happens, then we got some issues. But I don't necessarily foresee that. And speaking of numbers and people asking for them, Gibbs's option was obviously accepted, and that's because the opposite. The running back tag is pretty low, and it helps us kind of, okay, we can kick that for another year, and we're not going to have to give him, because he's probably going to get, a lot of people are saying 20 to 22. I think he's going to get more than that. I think he's going to get
Oof.
like 24, honestly, per year. And I think it's going to be, a team friendly, construction of the deal, but I think he's going to get quite a bit. The numbers that I pulled for Gibbs were 4 years, 84 million, so 21 million per year. And I would love that. I just think he's going to get closer to top dollar in the running back market.
I remember seeing a while back, like, I mean, 3, 4 months back, that they were saying. At the time, it was like 4 years, 88, I want to say, for 22 a year. I feel like that's realistic, and while not quite being team friendly, that wouldn't completely reset the market because I know Saquon's making what 21,
I
if I'm
believe
not
so. I
mistaken.
can check on that. Yeah,
I know
let me
it's at
check.
least 20 because I know he made history the first 20, but I think he got 21. But that would put him a little over. But Bijan hasn't signed his extension yet, has he?
No.
Okay, so if you we can sign him that sooner the better, and then get Bijan, go over that, and just like I mentioned with St. Brown. So while I struggle because I'm like he's obviously a giant focal point of our offense, I do think there's potential just with how the running back position is that there is a small chance if he's trying to break the bank that he could price himself out of Detroit. Now I don't think he's going to, but I think if he wants 25 or something, we just can't allocate that to our running back when we have all these other guys.
Yeah, I think it would be hard, but it also just depends on the construction of the deal as well. Because again, I personally believe we could get a lot for trading Gibbs, and if it happened, I would be upset, but I would kind of understand the roster construction part of it. But you're trading, you'd probably get two first rounders for him. You know what I mean? Do you like Jameer Gibbs is the type of guy that the Lions would probably trade two first round picks to get. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of how Brad Holmes operates. So I just don't see him being the guy that's going to be like, well, I'm going to go ahead and trade my absolute stud running back for two first round picks and hope that I can get one stud player with those two picks. You know what I mean? And like I said, I do get it from a value standpoint. And if we were a worse team, I'd say yes, please do that because it would give us more firepower. But with the way the Lions are made right now, keep it pushing. Let's go for the Super Bowl run. Obviously, if Jameer Gibbs wants like $35 million a year and he's gonna, make it to where we can't get the other guys, then we have that conversation. But I do think Gibbs is going to be closer to, like you said, Saquon. He was getting 20.6 million, so basically
Okay.
21 million per year. So yeah, I think he'll probably get somewhere 21, 22, which I think is
That
doable
I'd give him.
for the
Yeah.
Lions. Yeah. And then moving on to the next extension, Brian Branch is another guy that needs an extension, and he's coming off an Achilles tear. So the Lions are probably going to wait and see with him. Obviously, they. It's kind of funny. Brad Holmes likes to draft and sign people. Um, when they come off of injuries, but they really like to wait and see in terms of signing like big extensions, which is the smart way to do it, I think. Obviously, Brian Branch, they did it with Aiden Hutchinson when he snapped his leg in half. He came back and he was just like, I guess I'm going to play out my last year of this deal, and then we're going to sign me to this big mega extension because, we didn't know what he was going to look like coming back. So I think Branch is going to have a similar situation, especially the position he plays. The Achilles is such an important tendon with, stop, start, and all the turn and run and everything like that that a safety has to do. However, I do think the Achilles could maybe hurt his value just a little bit. The numbers that I pulled on this, 4 for 88, so 22 million a year, which is around the safety market. That's kind of what we would expect to see Branch get. But with the injury, who knows? We'll kind of wait and see on that. I could see as low as 18, depending on, if it's a shorter deal or more guarantees or whatever the case. Obviously these guys in the finance room know how to construct a contract, so they'll figure that part out. But there's a lot of things, with Branch that we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, this one worries me a little bit just because of the injury. Um, we don't know how he's going to look after, and I'll kind of address the elephant in the room, in my opinion. I know the season's not quite fresh on our minds, and he got hurt in the middle of the season, so it's been a minute since we played. At least when it comes to this past season, prior to the injury, I don't think he looked as good as he did the year before. So, in my opinion, he was taking a slight step back. Granted, to be fair, it was a high bar to try to maintain, because I mean, I am a big Brian Branch fan, but he looked like he took a little step back prior to the injury, and then he got injured. So obviously that's going to be a further setback. I don't care what anyone says. I know there's a lot of people that have this injury and come back and play. It's for some strange reason becoming a common injury, which is a whole nother conversation. So it's not like a career ender like it was 20 years ago, but you aren't the same. You're not 100%. Even if you're 95%, that's I'll take it. But when you are talking about potentially tripling your pay, might even be quadruple since he was a second round pick. After an injury like that, I'm gonna take the wait and see approach with Branch because I really hope he can come back because he was so much fun to watch, whether he was playing safety or the nickel corner spot. He was a super valuable part of the defense. In between him and Kirby, uh, you can tell obviously the Lions defensive backs got significantly worse once those two went down. But at the same time, when it comes to Branch's extension, and another thing I think people sometimes talk about but sometimes don't is Kirby himself. Just because we already kind of gave one safety a record-breaking contract, do we want to put 45 million to 50 million in two safeties? Especially since both of them, I don't want to call them injury prone, but are dealing with something that could be long term currently. So I would personally prefer to kind of wait on Branch. I don't know if we can like do a franchise tag or some small term deal, or even if you would accept like a 1 or 2 year deal, maybe for like 10 or 12 on like a prove it deal. Show us your back, and then we'll give you your record setting money. But Branch is one I would probably wait on personally.
Yeah, and honestly, the big thing with me, other than the injury with Branch, is his penalties. Like he costs us a lot of yardage in games with those penalties, and he's a great player, but we know safety is not a premium position. So like we got him in the second round. Like I do feel, it crazy to say, it would be easier to replace Branch, I think, than Campbell or Gibbs or even maybe Laporta.
I agree.
Obviously, I think Laporta wants a bit less money than these other guys, so he's probably the easiest to sign, quote unquote. But he's probably also the easiest to let walk in terms of just like roster value because just in terms of how many targets is he going to get, what are we asking our tight ends to do now with our new offense and yada yada yada. I still think we need to keep Laporta, but that's just my thoughts. I feel like Branch kind of has his issues. Like you said, the play wasn't, as high as we've or high level as we've seen it in years prior. The penalties, the injury. So we're just gonna have to let that one play out. And then speaking of Laporta, he is the last guy that we have to give a big extension to pretty soon. But his is a little bit more manageable. The number I saw was 4 for 68, which is 17 million per year, and that is easy. I would do that in a heartbeat because if you think about it he's I don't want to say he's like a receiver, but if you look at the money that receivers get, I think tight ends are asked to even do more in terms of they have to block, they have to catch, they have to pass block, they have to do a lot of different stuff. So I think tight ends are very valuable. So $17 million a year, I think, is a huge bargain for a guy that I consider a top five tight end in the NFL. And obviously, he's got his back issue, so we'll kind of see how that plays out. But in terms of the talent on the field when he's healthy and everything like that, I think that's a big steal. But again, similar to Branch, we'll have to kind of see how that injury goes.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. That's pretty much my entire talking point on him is if he was healthy, 17 million a year is absolutely a steal. I kind of feel like, and I'm going to go on a quick side tangent, that the NFL position and the tight end in the NFL is a position that's highly underrated. If you look at some of the best quarterbacks of all time, the Brady's, like he had Gronk, Mahomes got Kelsey, Manning had Dallas Clark, etc., etc. There's a pretty common theme, and we mentioned during it all of our draft shows. A lot of players consider, or a lot of people consider, a tight end a young quarterback's best friend. I mean, look at Brock Bowers just coming in the league and taking over. Not that he's the average tight end or anything, but tight ends can have a major impact. And as you mentioned, now that receivers are making 40, 45 million, 17 for a guy that, I mean, if as long as you feature him and give him enough targets, if healthy, he can easily get 1,000 yards in a season. I think the only reason he hasn't is because we have, all the other mouths to feed, which is a good problem to have. But it all comes down to his back injury. We've dealt with back injuries before with um, Haloti Vaitai and with Levi Onwuzurike, and unfortunately, these back injuries tend to linger. So I don't know what the exact back injury is. I do remember reading it in the past, but I don't know what the T47 whatever thing is. I would be doing something else if I did. And like is if he can heal and come back 100%, without a doubt, get him. But it does cause me concern with back injuries that those tend to linger a little bit for me. Also, well, I randomly thought of it quick. Jump back to the importance of tight ends. Look at what the Bears did once they got Loveland. Like that kind of completely transformed the offense. So it is very important to have a good tight end. Thankfully, if he's healthy, we have a top five tight end in the whole league. And I mean, look at Green Bay when Kraft went out. Everything changes. The tight end position needs to be valued more. Although I hope it happens after Laporta signs, just because we don't need to drive up the price anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, pending his injury, it's a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Hopefully he resigns, but we will have to see. But speaking of, big money going places, Jared Goff's contract is just not awesome, if you ask me. Now, obviously we restructured it, but a lot of people were like, well, now we're stuck with him until the end of his contract. Actually, the restructure wasn't, that bad. In my opinion, they just kind of, moved it to a bonus, and now he has way more guaranteed money next year. But after 2027, so we are stuck with him, and I don't mean stuck as in oh my
Good.
god, Goff sucks. But we cannot do anything about Goff for at least 2 seasons, which is totally fine. I don't think that's something that we have to really worry about in the next 2 seasons. However, after the 2027 season, he will be 33 years old, and we can cut him and save a bunch of money, but we'll have to eat 38 million dead cap. I don't think that's going to happen. But the point I'm bringing this up is 2028 is when his contract runs out. He also has a $69.6 million cap hit. So we're gonna have to see what that looks like in 2028, if that is a bargain or not, because who knows if quarterbacks are gonna make $100 million a year by then. Um, but either way, I say all that to say maybe it's time the Lions start thinking about the quarterback position for the future. And the only reason I bring this up is obviously we don't really have to worry until 2028. However, 2027 is a damn good quarterback class, okay? And call me crazy, but I think the Lions, not to say they should, it could make sense for them to select a quarterback with their first round pick in the 2027 draft, just if all the quarterbacks pan out the way that they're supposed to this season, because we know how that goes with college quarterbacks. I mean, we've seen it before. Garrett Nussmeier was supposed to be a first number one overall pick, and he was a seventh rounder. So we can see a lot of fluctuation with that. However, I don't think it would be crazy for them to decide, look, we got two more years of Goff. He's probably going to, start taking, a step back a little bit by that time. And we'll see. We've seen quarterbacks play until their 40s. So I just don't think that's going to be the norm. You know what I mean? I don't want to rely on Goff to be able to do that. But I think it's time that we start talking about it.
Yeah, I don't. Which is fine. It's rare we disagree, so that's fine. Uh, I don't see us, and I know you're still talking a year or two down the line, but I don't see. Granted, I don't have the power of hindsight to see what he's going to do the next 2 years, but unless there is a pretty steep drop off, I am also just a bigger golf fan than most. But I don't see us doing a Rams move, even though Brad Holmes came from the Rams front office and they just drafted Stafford's future replacement a couple years ahead of time. So, I mean, maybe I can see the stars aligning that way. I just kind of hope it's not. I don't think he's that old. Even a couple years from now, I mean, we got guys like Stafford who's like 38 in the league, still going strong. Just had an MVP season, somehow getting better at his age. And Rodgers is what, like 41, 42 or something like that. I know that's like you said, that's not the norm, but it could happen. And I don't mind addressing the backup spot because we don't really have a backup unless you want to trust the undrafted free agent. I'm not trusting Teddy Bridgewater. He's already in his early 30s. So like I understand the need to try to get that um future successor down the road, but at least for here and now, I don't know if it makes sense in my own mind. Let me rephrase. Because I feel like, especially for the Rams, I feel like are a prime example. We have not too well, especially now, not too many holes left, so I would really prefer to just spend those resources elsewhere. But I mean, this time next year, depending on how he plays, we could be trying to ship him out. Like who knows? So as of right now, here today, I'm a little uneasy with the. I'll just say topic because I don't think it makes sense today, which I know you're not saying today. Um, but I'm giving golf a longer leash than most. I'll say that way.
Well, I am glad we disagree on something finally. It's kind of a fun when you disagree. But with that, I will say, I do agree with you for the most part. However, I do think personally, if, in terms of roster construction, if we like, bro, let's say we pick at 30 next year, and like Drew Mestamaker is sitting there. I'm not saying he will be. That's just a name I'm throwing out there for all the people that are like, there's no way he's going to be the number one pick. He'll never be there. That's just a name. Okay. It's just a guy I thought of. If he's sitting there and we're like, look, man, it's either him or a fucking defensive tackle. I might be going with the quarterback. I'm just saying.
Trenches. What shore are we on?
True, true. We are the trench mafia or whatever you want to call it. But with that being said, I do think it would be smart to go, okay, not to say Goff, even like worst case scenario, Goff plays a couple more good years and we only get 2 years of this guy's rookie deal. However, you would probably know by then if this guy's good or not. And that's really the reason I say that is because you want to get ahead of it. Like, I don't think we should do what the Rams did. Okay. I don't like what the Rams did because the Rams are like, I feel like they reached a little bit for the prospect. And I also just don't love that they drafted a quarterback at that spot. Let's say if, a better quarterback was there, totally understand. But at 13, the value with you do have a decent amount of holes. You're trying to make a final Super Bowl push before your quarterback leaves forever. I think it would have been, I get it, but I think it would have been better to go after a win now piece. However,
Oh,
with the
absolutely.
Lions, it's just money. That's really the biggest issue for me is that Jared Goff at 34 years old, I'm sorry, I'm not paying the dude $90 million a year. There's no way.
That's going to be a
Like
steal by that time.
it,
People are going to be making
well,
150 a year.
if that happens, the NFL might not be around much longer. Unfortunately, because I've been talking about this a little bit, but I do think that bubble is going to pop sooner than people think. I'm not going to say it's going to be the next 10 years or anything like that, but I mean, think about it, dude. They are billion-dollar corporations, sure, but if you're paying a quarterback 150 million, a wide receiver 110 million, a defensive end 120 million, that's like $500 million just in three players on your team. Like that's,
Make that in ticket sales.
yeah, I think you'd be surprised. And that's my point. Is I think that at some point it's going to get to the point where the NFL goes, we have to charge $1,000 a ticket just to make ends meet, and then people are going to go, I'm not paying that.
Oh,
We'll just
absolutely.
watch it at home. But I'm sure if that were the case, the TV would go up, and then they'd figure out, well, we can just tear down half this stadium and sell off the land or something. I don't know what they would figure out to do that, but they
They would
would
just
just
tell the
have to.
players, "Hey, you're not getting that much money."
Well, that's the thing. It's like supply and demand, and I think we're going to hit a wall where they're going to tell a quarterback, "Look, we're not going to pay a quarterback $250 million a year. I'm sorry, that's not happening ever." And then obviously the NFL is the only league, so they set the price. So luckily for them, they do have that to fall back on. But back to the golf conversation specifically, I just $70 million a year is a lot, and like we
Oh, it's
both
a
said,
lot.
it might be a bargain by then, and who knows what happens. Maybe he takes a pay cut because he's getting older. Who knows? I'm just saying, hypothetically, if there is a really good quarterback prospect there and we're sitting there at 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, anywhere in there,
32.
I that'd be even better. Honestly, I think it would be even better if we were at 32 and took a quarterback because then I'd go, we're going for a dynasty, bitch. We're about to win 10 Super Bowls
I'll tell
because
you what,
if
if we win the Super Bowl and pick 32, I would be okay with the move because I've already peaked. My fandom would have peaked, so
right.
on to the next regime or whatever.
Yeah, and I just feel like I said in this scenario, I think it does make some sense to think about it. However, with that being said, that is all we have today for Detroit Lions conversation. Obviously, we already, I mean, we kind of talked about Branch and Kirby already. I know that's the last topic we have, but to really sum it up, Branch and Kirby, their health. Obviously, we spoke about Branch quite a bit. Kirby, not as much. Kirby, I don't feel that confident right now, but as we've said many times on the show, Brad Holmes and them know more than we do, and they seem pretty confident. So I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh, we're screwed. Kirby Joseph is never gonna play football again because I have no idea. So we'll just kind of have to see how that plays out, and hopefully he comes back at true to form.
Did you see his? I don't know if it was an X post or Instagram post. I saw it on X, but sometimes people post Instagram post on X or screenshots or whatever. But did you see the one that Kirby posted?
I believe so. When was that? Like today or
Just
yesterday?
today.
Okay,
It just was
I
like
believe
looking forward
so.
to year 5 or something like that.
Hmm.
So I mean, right now, unfortunately, with the time of year it is, we just have to dig through cryptic tweets and hope it's good news. But with them not taking a safety in the draft at all, even in late rounds, obviously still knowing Branch is hurt, he's going to miss at least the first month of the season unless he's some miracle man. Um, I would assume he's good to go because if you know you're down Branch and then you don't know about Kirby, I highly doubt you just kind of don't address the safety position. I know we got Eisen from Tampa Bay in free agency, but I feel like the situation in the tea leaves are looking pretty good for Kirby, despite what a lot of people were conversating about last season.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. With that being said, if you want to run through a simulation of your own, if you want to be the Lions GM and redo the offseason, even if you want to see what you could have done that the Lions didn't do, or whatever the case, check out sticktothemodel.com. The link is in the description. Use our code MFN2026 and save at checkout. It's a really cool platform, really cool software. You get to, like I said, go through a whole simulation of being the GM in the offseason, and then you can sim the season to see how it would play out. So check them out. Link is in the description. And then at Fanatics, you can always grab some new sports gear and sports apparel. Obviously, the NFL draft just happened, but the NBA playoffs are also going on right now. So if you are looking to rep your team, the Detroit Pistons, after they moved on after the first round, go ahead and check them out. The link is also in the description. James, you made a face there as if something had happened.
N- um, no, nothing official or anything. I
Oh,
was just scrolling through X and I just saw something under trending, a Cowboys fan page, more than just like a fan, like a group like us, a fan page, um, commented about how they claim the Dallas Cowboys are going to try to trade for Jack Campbell of the Lions. So,
well, we will see. I doubt that would happen, but
oh, me
Jerry
too.
Jones is
But
wheeling and dealing right now. So they got a bunch of 27 firsts. Maybe the
I mean,
Lions.
everyone's got a price.
Yeah, I mean, if you traded me, give me two firsts for Jack Campbell, we might have a conversation. I'm just saying. Just because, again, kind of like Laporta, I love Jack Campbell. Don't get me wrong. I like the pick when it happened more than most, and I love the player today. But it is a position where it's like, look, we can go get a guy to play linebacker that, but he's not as good as Jack Campbell, but I don't think our defense will be completely screwed. And then we'll have two first round picks to put more into the defense to kind of make up for those little issues that we have. So I wouldn't do it necessarily um, just because, but like you said, everybody has a price.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm like, I would not even really pick up the phone, but as I was saying, my old homage that I've mentioned for years is three first round picks. You can have anyone. I'll give you Hutch for three first round picks. Between injuries, contracts, etc., I'll take three first round picks for anyone on the team.
Yeah,
So
I kind of feel you there for the most part. It would be odd at the current Lions roster construction to trade Hutch for three firsts, but at the value point, it's like, I get it. But with that being said, moving on to our last point of the show, we're just going to go ahead and give you our draft winners and losers. We haven't talked too much about the NFL draft just because we talked about it so much. We figured we would give you guys a little bit of a break, and as the offseason lulls even more, then we'll bring it up a little bit more because that's really all there's going to be to talk about. So just being honest with you there's not going to be a lot of news going on unless something bad happens, which cross your fingers, hope that doesn't happen for
look
any
forward to
NFL
those
team.
jersey numbers.
Right. Yeah, that's going to be breaking news in about 2 weeks,
Oh
folks.
yeah.
So just stay tuned for that. But with that, we're going to go ahead and go through our draft winners and losers. Um, I I feel like there was a lot of winners, not too many losers in my opinion. It wasn't like, you know, there wasn't that many drafts that I just said what. Like I feel like there always is every year that it's like a what the hell is going on. There was a couple, but which we'll talk about. But my biggest winner I think was the Cleveland Browns. In my opinion, they did a great job throughout this draft. They traded down with the Chiefs and they got Spencer Fano, who was my number one offensive lineman on the board or period in the draft because he was the only offensive lineman or the first taken, I should say. And that shores up their offensive line. They also add some more pieces. They then get KC Concepcion, who I love as like a gadget. He's a great wide receiver. Don't get me wrong. On top of this, but I like him as a gadget player. Put the ball in his hands and he can make stuff happen. So the Browns, got a really good player there with Concepcion, and then they doubled up with wide receiver and probably not the best, but my favorite wide receiver in the draft, Denzel Boston. I know I've talked about him a lot on the show, but I love pairing Casey Concepcion with Denzel Boston. That is like a match made in heaven, in my opinion. You got the guy who works the overs and the unders, and now and you got your Harold Fannin as well, who kind of does the intermediate. And then, you just need another, deep burner guy, and I think the Browns receiving core is pretty much done. And they have Jerry Jeudy as well, so they're going to have, Shador Sanders is going to have some good receivers over there, which it's apparently going to be Deshaun Watson, but we'll see about that. I think if that was the case, it's more of a price tag situation because he's making like 70 million a year. But with that, with their second round pick, they got Emmanuel McNeil Warren, which a lot of people thought was going to be the Vikings pick at 18. Obviously, that wasn't the case, but a first round pick value for the media. Nonetheless, they got him at the 26th pick of the second round, so really good value there. And then they got Austin Barber from Florida in the third round, the tackle. I think really good value. Obviously, he's probably not a year one starter, but they need help along the offensive line, and he's a guy that you could move around the offensive line. So they got some good value there in the third. And then they got Parker Brailsford, the center from Alabama, which I've mentioned on the show a few times. I'm a big fan of his. So I like that there. They also got Justin Jefferson, the linebacker from Alabama, Joe Royer, the tight end from Cincinnati, Taylon Green, the quarterback from Arkansas, who was a huge combine breakout performance. So we'll kind of see how that plays out for them. Maybe they play him at tight end, maybe at receiver, maybe quarterback. We'll see. And then rounded out with Carson Ryan, the tight end from BYU. So I really, really like what the Browns did in this draft. And that's why I gave them an A, and that's why they're my number one winner, I would say.
For my number one winner, which just surprises me because they don't often win, is the New York Giants. I really like, as we've mentioned, kind of at nausea, trenches, and with their two first round picks, they went one offensive lineman and one defensive lineman, and I think you can make a case that they got the both of each. They got Arvell Reese at 5, and I know we've talked about making him more of an outside line or a off the ball linebacker, but we'll see how he kind of plugs and plays in that defense because they already have a plethora of defensive ends and edge rushes over there. But either way, he's going to be a damn good player. And then Maui Goa, who they did say is going to play guard. I thought he was going to be more, and yes, there was talk about him being a guard beforehand. I thought he was going to stay at tackle personally, but it makes sense because they already have tackles over there in New York. I also like the addition of Colton Hood, the cornerback from Tennessee in round two, and Malachi Fields, the wide receiver from Notre Dame. He's a big 6'5", 220-pound receiver, and to pair him up with Malik Neighbors coming off of his injury for Jackson Dart, they got a weapon for their young quarterback. They got protection from the young quarterback, and they loaded up the defense that they can go on and get the other team's quarterback. I feel that fundamentally that is the exact way to build a team. So while they have struggled in the past a little bit, I feel like I would say the recent history, because obviously when they were winning Super Bowls, they had the Strahans, the Uras, they were defensively led, and I feel like they're kind of getting back to that, and while dipping their toe in the waters to help their offense as well. So I feel like they're getting back to their roots, and I really like what the Giants did with this draft.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree. Like we talked about, Maui Noah is a guy I definitely saw as a guard, but I think the Giants see him as a tackle of the future. He's just going to play guard for now because, like you said, Illuminor is going to probably start at right tackle for them, I would assume. I mean, they just extended him, so that's going to be their guy at least for the next season. With that, my next winner is the Dallas Cowboys, and I hate saying this, but I think they did a great job. Honestly, I have a theory. Okay. I think Jerry Jones made that Netflix documentary. I know you haven't seen it. I know we've talked about it on the show. It's good. I know you don't like the Cowboys. I mean, I assume you don't like the Cowboys because you're a Lions fan, and all Lions fans hate the
Well,
Cowboys. Um,
yeah, I hated the Cowboys before that, but yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, I feel like everybody who's not a Cowboys fan hates the Cowboys.
Yep.
It's like like the Lakers of the NFL in a lot of
Exactly.
ways.
Yes.
But
Yankees. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But with that, I do feel like that documentary was really good, and it made the Cowboys look real nice, and it made Jerry Jones look like a genius. And I think Jerry Jones was a part of that, and then watched it and said, you know what, maybe I am a genius. I'm gonna go out here and make some moves. So he's been wheeling and dealing, baby. Freaking, he's been an out west outlaw on the trade market. Traded Micah Parsons, and then trading for Quinnen Williams, and trading for Rashawn Gary, and doing all these different moves. So. The Cowboys, though, did some trading on draft night as well. Speaking of Jerry Jones wheeling and dealing, they got Caleb Downs, and this is probably the best pick out of their whole draft. Obviously, the first round most likely would be. But just in terms of the player, I love the player. I love the fit. I love everything about it. Caleb Downs at 11. Obviously, they traded up. They didn't give a ton to move up one pick, but apparently there was other teams interested, so they had to go up and get their guy. And actually, apparently, they were looking to get up to 9 to get him, but the Browns didn't want to move back twice, considering they really wanted Fano. So. With that, they then took Malachi Lawrence after trading down. This one I didn't love as much. I just liked it. I do like the player, but he's a little older. I don't see him as a true like edge setter in the NFL, so he might be more of like a specialist. Obviously, he'll be your starter, but you're going to have to rotate him a little bit. And then Jay Sean Barham in the third round, I really liked. Obviously, Michigan man, guy we've talked about on the show many times. I just feel like he was kind of a steal here. I obviously mocked him to the Lions in the second round a little bit, and I think he's got a really high ceiling. So I like their pickup there, and he's very versatile, playing linebacker and edge, which they need both. So really good pick there. Drew Shelton, the tackle from Penn State in the fourth round, really good depth. Obviously can has some potential with some traits to become a little bit more than that. Devin Moore, the corner from Florida. LT Overton, the edge from Alabama. Obviously, he could honestly be a rotational player for them day one, in my opinion. And then Anthony Smith, the wide receiver from East Carolina in the seventh round. I gave them an A, but honestly, that was mostly for the first 3 picks. I just think they really did a good job there.
Yeah. The other team I have given an A plus is unfortunately the other New York team. I really like what the Jets did. And I guess I shouldn't say unfortunately. Normally I root against New York teams, but since Glenn left the division and all that, I do root for him. I do wish him well. But I really like what they did with their picks. Um, I don't, I will say, I'm not a big fan of the Bailey pick. I understand the hype, I guess I'll say, but I'm not as big on the projections. But I really like the next 3 picks. So if Bailey works out, I mean, obviously that's fantastic. But I really like when they took Kenyon Sadiq and especially pairing him with Omar Cooper Jr., their third first round pick, because I feel like they will feed on each other because they have a pretty similar style of play in terms of being yak guys and run after the catch or yards after the catch. And I feel like uh, I almost said Brett Holmes. Nope. I feel like Aaron Glenn is trying to kind of mimic what the Lions are doing. I feel like Sadiq is a version of Sam Laporta. Wow, spaced on his name after we just talked about him for 10 minutes. And a great run after the catch guy, great hands. We've talked about his speed. 6'3", 250 pounds. He can block a little bit too. And Omar Cooper Jr. can do a lot of things well, but I feel like where he excels is his running after the catch. He can be a slot or an outside guy. I feel like he can be at least the St. Brown role for that offense. And they are trying to, since there was no good, or at least no top tier quarterback available for them, and they were smart, in my opinion, and passed on Ty Simpson at two. I thought there was a slight chance they go there just because NFL teams tend to reach on these quarterbacks sometimes. But instead of that, they just went and put other pieces in place and can do shorter distance routes and kind of just let the playmakers go make plays on their own. Get your JMOs and some of your other guys and just give them a 5 yard slant and let them do the work. And then in the second round, they came back with one of my more favored, at least second round picks with D'Angelo Ponce, and that was with the Lions pick at 50 because I remember saying prior to the draft, if the board fell a certain way, I can see him going to the Lions. And I'm really interested to watch his NFL journey because he is a phenomenal player, but severely undersized. So I really hope he can make it. I feel like it's a good feel-good story, and I hope it works out for him. But not gonna lie, there is a part of me in the back of my head that can see one of the taller guys like Mike Evans and whatnot just moss him on an average play in and play out, and be like, well, that didn't go as I thought it would. But he didn't have the issues covering big receivers at the NCAA level, so hopefully it translates for the Jets' sake. But I really like those picks, especially with, like I said, if Bailey pans out, then obviously phenomenal icing on the cake. But I really like those middle three picks even more than Bailey himself.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you there. I am not as high on Bailey, but that's probably why I don't have them on my winners. They're just kind of in my mid tier. But I like everything else they did. However, we have some sort of breaking news for the Detroit Lions right now. Nothing crazy, nothing player related. However, this story came out. Well, it's not breaking news. It came out a little bit yesterday or earlier today, 10 hours ago. Matt Campbell initially agreed to take the Detroit Lions head coach job in 2021 before changing his mind, which led the Lions to hire Dan Campbell.
I did not hear that.
That's crazy. And then it says Dan Campbell's intro presser. I told my agent, make sure that they think I'm Matt Campbell. So I think that's how this has really worked out great for me. So, like, without knowing that, everybody was like, what? But this makes sense with context. It's kind of crazy to think that didn't really get out much prior to that story. So, pretty crazy there. Now, I do agree with you though with the Jets. In my next winner, I have the Arizona Cardinals, which most people probably disagree with me here, but Jeremiah Love. Okay, I know I shit on the pick quite a bit. Beginning or to start the draft. But as the draft kind of went on, it was like, okay, I see what they're doing. I kind of understand it because, dude, think about it. They have a lot of weapons on offense. Obviously, Jeremiah Love is another really good one. They added Chase Bazantis to their offensive line, which I'm a big fan of his. And I think he's going to be a difference maker in the trenches for them. And then the Carson Beck pick, I personally like it. Look, a lot of people hate it, but I'm just going to tell you right now, a lot of people would also say third round picks aren't worth shit. So oh, trade that third round pick for a player because it doesn't matter. A lot of fans would say that to you, unless it was a player they don't like. Then they would say, wow, third round picks are worth so much.
Unless it's
So
three third round picks. I've heard a lot of
right,
people losing those.
right, right. Um, but with that, I do think Carson Beck is not my favorite quarterback prospect by any means, but I understand the thought process. Okay, if he pans out, you now have a legit offense in the NFL. Like, not a lot of holes there, man. Yeah, maybe they could use another receiver, but they drafted Reggie Virgil in the fifth round, who I think could be a day one, not difference maker, but impact player. You know, he could be their wide receiver three. And then they got Caleb Proctor in the fourth round, who I really like as well on the defensive side of the ball. But those first three picks really are like, okay, I see the direction the Cardinals are going in, and Jeremiah Love makes a lot more sense seeing what the other things that they did. Considering if Carson Beck, if you're gonna if let me say it this way, if you want Carson Beck to pan out, you are giving him every possible uh, uh, potential to do that with the weapons and everything that you're building. So I gave him a B, but that's just because I don't think there was a ton of like outright obvious winners in this draft outside of a few teams. But and then I know because you don't have any more winners, I'll just go with my last one here. The Carolina Panthers were another winner for me. I just feel like they did a really good job in this draft overall. I liked pretty much every pick that they have. Monroe Freeling in the first round. I know I've been a little vocal on this that I'm not as high on him as others. However, I like it here for them. I think it makes a lot of sense. Play the upside, play the potential, because you're not really ready to win now anyway. And you have some guys who can kind of move around the offensive line now. So I like it there. And then Lee Hunter in the second round, I do like a lot because good luck running on this Carolina defense now. They got Devin Lloyd, they got Lee Hunter, and they got Derek Brown. Obviously, they signed Jalen Phillips, but he's not really a run defender. But you just made it to where he doesn't really have to be. So that's really nice for them. And then Will Lee, the corner out of Texas, or I'm sorry, Chris Brazel, the wide receiver out of Tennessee. I really like 6'5", 205, 210. Freaking ran a 4.3, so he's a burner as well. Getting that in the third round, I think, is good value for them as well. Obviously, Jonathan Mingo, the Panthers might be a little scared of this type of player, but it makes sense here in the third round. And then the fourth round, they go corner with Will Lee from Texas A&M. Really like the pick there. Sam Hecht, the center in the fifth round out of Kansas State. I've talked about it. He was probably not, he might not have been my number one outright, but he was like 1A, 1B to a couple other guys that I really liked as well. And then Zakee Wheatley is another guy that I have, talked about a lot on the channel. So I really like their draft, and I think they did a good job overall there. So I give them a B as well. And then moving on to our losers here. My first loser is what I think everyone's loser is the 49ers. I just think they did not have a good draft this year. And, there's so many reasons for that. But obviously, they traded out of the first round, and then they took Deshaun Stribling, the receiver, in the first. Then they took Romello Height in the third, or I'm sorry, in the second, and then they took Romello Height in the third, and then Kalen Black in the third as well. Just I don't hate the Romello Height pick, but the Stribling one was just a little confusing. And then Kalen Black, it's like, oh, they took another third round running back that's never going to see the field. Awesome. So the Niners just didn't really make a lot of sense there. I did like the Grayson Halton pick, though, and the Ephesians Prysock pick. So I think that kind of upped my grade a little bit because I gave them a C. I probably would have gave them less had they not. I definitely would have gave them less, but maybe even an F had they not gotten those two pretty high value picks.
Yeah, I gave them a D because they're, like you mentioned, clearly on my list as well. They didn't have a first round pick after trading back. They took Stribling with their first pick, which is pick 33, first pick of the second round. So close to a first round pick, but he loses that fifth year option possibility, which I don't think they'll miss out because I don't think they'll re-sign him. I'm not very high on him. I had him as a third round grade, and I don't mind that obviously they felt different about him because who am I? But what bothers me is when Lynch came out and said that he was number one receiver on their entire board. And I'm like, there is no way you had him above Tate and Tyson and several other players. And if you did, I don't know how you have a GM job, to be honest with you. And then when they took Keelan Black, as you mentioned in the third round, they mentioned that he was running back two on their board. So I don't know who their scout is or whatever. Um, and I'm not trying to crap on the player, but just he's not the number two running back in this draft. And if he is, they just know way more than I do, which they probably do because they're getting paid millions. But I don't see I don't see how that's the case. Romello Height, I'm okay with. I don't mind him as a player. He was a third round pick, so it's not like they took him super high. But I do feel like he's just a third down rusher. I don't think he can really play much on first and second downs, especially early in his career. So to me, your first three picks are a reach on a receiver, uh, just a pure pass rusher that you can only play, 30% of the game, and a backup running back. And I do agree. I do like some of their later picks a little more, but it's not enough, in my opinion, to save this draft class. I give it an overall rating of a D.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you there. My next loser is the Jacksonville Jaguars, which I think everybody also agrees with. With their first pick in this draft in the second round, they took the tight end Nate Borkacher out of Texas A&M, which obviously he rose up draft boards, and a lot of people were talking about him. However, I do think it is a bit of a reach. I mean, his age, he's not a high level athlete in terms of, the long speed and things like that you look for. Obviously, he does do a lot of things well, so we'll kind of see how this plays out, but don't love the pick there. Albert Regis in the third round, the defensive tackle from Texas A&M. Don't love that pick either. I think it's a little early for him. I like the player, but just a little early. Emmanuel Pregnon, however, great pick. Back into the third round, I love it. And that's about the only one I like. Well, they got two other ones that I like here. So, and dude, they have so many draft picks. For all these draft picks,
Yeah.
they only had three that I liked. Jalen Husky in the third round. Not just a little early. Wesley Williams in the fourth round, a little early. Tanner Koziol is one I liked. I've talked about him many times on the show. Back into the fifth round, I think that's perfect value for him. But he was their second tight end drafted. So obviously they like tight ends, but they already had a couple on the roster, so they'll have to figure that out. Josh Cameron, the receiver from Baylor, I also liked in the sixth round. I think that's a good value. But outside of them, I just don't love the draft. And I think they took a decent amount of reaches. So I give them a C minus. I do think it's a little bit worse than the Niners, just because, like, man, they just reached so many times on players they just didn't need. And with how many picks that they had, I didn't come away with a lot that I liked.
Yeah, I didn't have them on my loser list because I think they did slightly better than most say. But that's also heavily weighted on Pregnon in the third. I was pretty big on him. And the one other thing I would like to say, I would circle Husky, the safety from Maryland, at pick 100, and Regis from
Hmm.
Texas A&M at pick 81, because those are two of the three picks that we traded them for Tesla. So I kind of want to. I know it's going to be hard to compare a D tackle and a safety to a receiver, but that's in pseudo terms. I know it's probably not who we would have drafted with those picks, but who we traded in order to get Tesla.
Right. And then my last, which I think we will agree on this, is the Los Angeles Rams. They just in my opinion, like we talked about earlier, the first round pick of Ty Simpson, I just felt was like a bit of a reach. I know they had the right idea, I feel like, but just not the right execution, in my opinion. I think with the Rams right now, you wait until 2027 to take that quarterback because I just think there's going to be a better person, a better player available. And I mean, you could just trade up and get one if you really like them anyway. So, and we know how the Rams feel about that. And then Max Clare, the tight end from Ohio State. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. I think it's a little early, but back end of the second round. I saw him as a third round guy, probably late third, but the NFL things are different, so we'll see how that plays out. But I just didn't love it. And then Keegan Trost from Missouri, that fell early to me. But I did like their last two picks in C.J. Daniels, the receiver out of Miami, and then Tim Keenan, the defensive tackle out of Alabama. So I think Keenan is a big steal specifically. But we'll see how that plays out. But I gave him a D just because I felt like they just didn't help themselves for a team that is looking to win a Super Bowl. Like your freaking wide receiver one's in rehab, and your wide receiver two is 34 years old and making like $20 million a year. And the first receiver you take in this draft is pick or in the sixth round with C.J. Daniels out of Miami. I mean, that to me is egregious. In terms of like you're basically telling Stafford to kiss your ring. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have them as a loser, just not quite as much. I gave them a C minus. I absolutely can't stand and laugh at the Ty Simpson pick. As I mentioned before, I don't think it's the right I don't think it's the right strategy and not the right player. I understand, as you kind of mentioned, if you had a um I don't know why my head went to Patrick Mahomes, maybe because he went 10th overall. But if you had a higher level quarterback prospect, it would at least make some more sense to me. I had Ty Simpson as a late second, early third in terms of talent. I knew he was going to be overdrafted by somebody, and I just didn't really see how it fits with the Rams being, other than this pick, being in win now mode, as you mentioned, and they have a potential hole at receiver just because, like you mentioned, age or who knows what's going on with Puka Nacua. I know they got Claire, so they got another weapon on offense, but tight end wasn't really a position of need. They have some decent tight ends over there. I do like Max Clare as a player, but I also had him as a third round grade. So I think that was a slight reach. I know it's super late in the second, so it's practically the third, but after reaching on Simpson, you, in my opinion, reach on Clare. I'm not too big on Trost, as you mentioned also. I think the only thing that like I can give like an A grade in terms of individual picks is Tim Keenan the third, and that was their last pick in the draft. But the reason I did not give this a D is because I do like Claire as a player. I think he's going to be a probably a 10-year starter in this league. I just know with um, I would say positional value plus the little bit of a reach, the two players I think of this draft class that will produce the most for the Rams is Team Keenan and Claire. I don't think Ty Simpson is even a potential successor to Stafford. I don't think he's got the talent level. I see him being another like Josh Wilson in the Jets. I just don't think he has it. So in my opinion, I like I said, I could be wrong, but I feel like pick 13 they just pretty much flushed down the toilet.
Yeah, and it's funny. You said Josh Wilson. It's Zach
I'm sorry.
Wilson, but
Oh,
I think it's because you also thought of Josh Rosen, which is exactly the same situation.
Cardinals guy, yeah.
I almost said in Carolina, but I meant with the Cardinals. See,
Yep.
we're all just messing up around here apparently right now.
There's so many quarterbacks that teams reach for in the past, like and I can now say it even though people attacked me for years, the Justin Fields. I don't
Mhm.
know if you can go as far back as Jake Locker. He was a can't miss prospect who missed. And I knew, like I said, for those reasons, I knew Simpson was going to go higher. It doesn't always just make sense. I mean, hell, Tim Tebow was a first round pick, and I knew while he was a legendary college quarterback, I thought it was pretty obvious that his game would not translate to the NFL level.
Yeah, and I mean, going as far back as guys like Christian Ponder as well.
Yep.
It's funny. I watched the Ponder and the Locker draft leading up to the draft because I just rewatched some random ones. So, kind of funny that those are the two kind of situations we're talking about. But with that, that is all we got for today's show. As always, we appreciate you guys for joining us to talk some ball. We will be back next week, as always. But with that, you know where to find me at JSoSweet. You know where to find James at Gullet_James. And you know where to find us both at MIFB Network and MichiganFootballNetwork.com. Links in the description for Fanatics and StickToTheModel.com. And use our code MFN2026 at checkout and save. Once again, we appreciate you guys for watching, and we will see you guys on the next one.